that's okay. Is that? Yeah, with me next to each other, we'll be neighbors.
I wanted to show you a little something.
Adam, do you want to turn the air off? It's just I find it so loud. I'm that way.
I don't want
It's
to
a
be
mild
in
day.
the,
What's
I
that?
don't want to be in your pictures.
Oh.
I'm gonna move.
Okay.
But anyway,
Why don't you come on this side? And what's this?
Nicolas Cage, the actor, he bought a tomb for when he dies.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what he had inscribed on the tomb.
Okay.
Which means everything from one.
Good. Well, that's the idea.
Yeah, I guess he believes.
Not the first person to have a tomb. 3 weeks. Here you go. Chapter 9.
That's it?
Yes, that is. Yeah. Welcome back. Yeah, I've been asking for that, but institutions aren't always so quick to respond. Really?
It's okay, I said we just share it. That's the day change.
What's that? Is someone's on the air, Adam? Thanks. I think there's a controller in the photocopy room. How's everybody? If anybody wants to leave some flyers somewhere, we have more coming along the way. It'd be nice if one's done at the JCC. I left some at Hillel. If there's places you think people might be interested, maybe a yoga class, Soul Center. Well,
No.
you can ask them at Soul Center. He's very friendly to you. And he often goes to ashrams and to yoga studios to talk there. He's really very kind of well received in that kind of milieu. So beautiful. How's everybody? Shalom, Maya. Thank you. Yeah, we're proud of those. Proud of the kids. Could you like? Yeah.
You want to give them to?
Yeah.
Okay, I will bring more.
Yeah. Here. There needs more. A few more are coming, but you want to place stacks around the city. Thank you. So we're talking about the conflict that happens and where it happens. Hi. Between the two souls. So chapters 1 to 8 was very much the informational section where we learned about the structure of the soul. In chapter 1 we learned about the two souls, and then chapters 2 through 5, the divine soul, and then chapters 6 through 8, both the animal soul and also the structure of the world with the klipa and holiness, and with the 3 empirically put and the klipa noga. So these should be all now familiar concepts. And now we're moving on to look at how we actually use these concepts within ourselves. And so first thing to frame is, how do the two souls interact within us? What are they doing? Are they just neutrally sitting there, one going, I'm the divine soul, one going, I'm the animal soul, and very nice? Or is something else happening? And what the Alter Rebbe is describing, what we're about to get to today, is there's an actual conflict, a battle happening between them. Yes? What we learned last week is the headquarters of each soul in our being is in a different actual place. Right? The headquarters of the animal soul, that self-centered drive, and again, it's not necessarily evil, but it's purely selfish in the most absolute terms, is in what we're calling the left side of the heart, or the side of the heart that connects to the body. It's the most physical aspect of the heart. So the part of the heart that wants to pump blood to give me energy, that wants to absorb nutrients, that wants to give me life. It's a constant drive to survive. That's the headquarters. Thank you. When you talk, you're only repeating what you already know. But if you listen, you may learn something new. I guess that's for me, from the Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama. And by the way, the Dalai Lama and Label sat down for 2 hours to compare notes. The Dalai Lama invited him to come and speak. So just, again, my plug's just a fascinating teacher, wonderful, wonderful person. So, but here's, the Dalai Lama is in the room with a message. So let's all turn on our listening ears, I guess. So the headquarters of the animal soul is the left side of the heart. The headquarters of the divine soul, I guess that's what's happening. The headquarters of the divine soul is actually in the brain. Right? The brain, which, yes?
So intellect versus emotion. Kind of?
Primarily intellectual with emotions versus primarily emotional with intellect. Right? But both are full beings, both have emotions and intellect. So the divine soul has emotions, and those are the ones we're channeling. The animal soul has intellect; those are the ones we're trying to keep tabs on. But yeah, that's their comfort zone. The divine soul's comfort zone is intellect. The animal soul's comfort zone is emotions. And then from the brain, it extends to the right side of the heart, the side of the heart that we say anatomically pumps the blood to the lungs, is more connected to air. Its work is to connect our body to air, to sort of a higher sense of spirituality, if you will. And from the brain, it extends into the right side of the heart, and there they meet, and there is where the battle begins. So today we're going to start looking at the battle of the animal soul versus the divine soul, which is really this whole innovation, or this whole focus that we have two souls and that they actually are not at peace with each other, they're in conflict with each other. That's the hallmark of the Alter Rebbe's entire approach. That if we understand why we have this stress inside, why we have this tension inside, we understand the dynamics of it and how they relate to the whole structure of our soul, we can now master that conflict in a way that will allow us to be masterful of our whole being. Yeah. Who needs? So we're on page, I'll tell you the page in a sec. The pages aren't on this. Who else?
You have 7 and 8 there.
7 and 8, we touched on a few pieces of it. This is what we looked at, but we didn't look at the whole thing. So if you're watching on video, hi. We're on page 140 of Lessons in Tanya, this edition. Right at the middle, 10th of Tevet. It is written, however. Chine ktiv le'um mil'um ye'ematz.
I have no idea where we are.
Right here, page 3 of our handout, right here. The verse refers to Jacob.
The Alter Rebbe.
Yes, sure. Yeah.
The Alter Rebbe has thus established that each of these two souls has its own separate abode and way of functioning. Least we erroneously conclude that each soul goes about its own affairs, not interfering or concerning itself with those of the other. The Alter Rebbe.
Adam, I know that not everybody has the best hearing. If we could somehow manage to get to the air. Thanks. Hinektiv le'um mil'um ye'ematz. Thus it is written, or it's written, however.
It is written, however, one nation shall prevail over the other nation. The verse refers to Jacob, Esau, in terms of Jews. Spiritual life, it is understood as the collision of the divine soul and the animal soul, respectively, who are constantly warring with each other.
All right, so the quote is, one nation will prevail against another nation. And that's not random. Just pass that down. That's actually a quote from when Rebekah was pregnant with Jacob and Esau. So when Rebekah was pregnant with Jacob and Esau, the fetuses in the belly were actually wrestling with each other all the time. And it even says in Midrash that whenever she passed by a house of study, she'd feel one of them, get excited and kind of be kicking. And then when she passed by a brothel or whatever, another one of them would keep kicking, but she didn't know she had twins. So she just felt her belly, when she passed the house of study, she thought, oh, I've got a real tzaddik. Even as a fetus, it's excited to go and learn. Then she passed by a bar, and again it was excited. She's like, what kind of tzaddik is that? He wants to, or she wants to, go do whatever. Right? So she didn't know why she had this child that seemed to have polarized tendencies, and she was worried. And so she went to the prophet to find out what was going on. And this is what the prophet said. You have actually twins, and they'll be struggling, and one nation will prevail over the other nation. They'll be fighting to dominate each other. Right, so this whole theme of two souls, when you look at the Torah, and you wonder why this obsession with younger siblings, right? There's Jacob and Esau, there's Ishmael and Yitzchak battling over who's going to stay around. There's Joseph, the youngest sibling, who winds up becoming the leader. The Torah over and over again seems to have this obsession with the younger sibling overtaking the older siblings. And when you look at the Tanya, you see that this was actually the inner meaning of that whole strand, and is most beautifully played out with Jacob and Esau, because literally they were wrestling in the womb, and which one came first? The robust, strong, ruddy, red fieldsman, covered with hair, vigorous. Esav came out first. But what was happening? Yaakov hadn't even given up at that point. Esav got his head out first, but Yaakov was still holding onto the heel. And the baby's finally born, and there's his other hand. Whoa, no, right? And from birth, they were struggling. And then what's his business with Jacob tricking his father and stealing the birthright? And sorry if I got that mixed up. But the bowl of soup in the field and stealing the birthright, that's a terrible thing to do, right? We read that and we think, this is our mentor. But it's teaching us something about the two souls. Because which of these two souls comes first? Yeah? The animal soul comes first. Right? We're born with an animal soul. We're born with both souls, but the animal soul is conscious and is influencing us. Right? I don't know many babies who, when they wake up at 4 a.m. hungry, they think, oh, my parents could use some sleep. My animal soul is hungry, but my divine soul knows my parents need some sleep. I'm going to wait. I'll wait till 7, then I'll start crying, right? Not the case, right? And we know it. We don't look at that baby, as we said, and say, how dare you wake up the whole house at 4 a.m? Don't you have any manners, right? We know a baby is just this. It's just natural, right? It has a divine soul, but the divine soul, as we said, is in a state of makif, in a surrounding state. It's there, but it has no conscious influence. It's only at 13 or 12 that the divine soul now enters into consciousness and can have an actual conscious influence in a different way. Yeah, it can influence me in a different way. So the animal soul gets there first. The animal soul establishes itself, and then the divine soul arrives at bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, and that's it. The animal soul set up shop in my mind. The animal soul set up in my heart. The animal soul has been using my 3 garments for 12 or 13 years. The animal soul has been strengthened by all the food it's eaten. It tastes so good. I love this Halloween candy. Look at all the fun I'm having. And now the divine soul shows up and it has to contend with a 12-year head start, a 13-year head start of the animal soul. And yet, it's our job to install that divine soul consciously, to educate ourselves, to do meditations, which we'll learn, and to actually manage to allow the divine soul to regain its birthright. Because in fact, the divine soul is the higher soul. It's the soul that's supposed to be in charge. And that's what's happening with Jacob and Esau. Jacob's mission, Jacob actually was in his source, was the higher soul, was the one that was supposed to be the leader. And Jacob's mission being born was to show that he actually had the birthright and to gain that birthright back. And that's why that whole drama plays out. And it looks questionable, but it's telling us something about ourselves. I know the animal soul was there first. I know it's the more vigorous, obvious soul. I know it feels like the divine soul is just off in a tent somewhere, quietly learning some Torah or whatever, but the divine soul actually is the one that has the birthright and has to regain use of all your faculties. And interestingly, even though it looks like the animal soul has such a big head start, and even though it looks like, Adam, I don't know if it's possible, now it's getting quite cool in here. It feels like the air conditioning is on. If you put Eric on it, tell him just no air whatsoever. Like imagine it's nighttime. Just light and no air. Thanks. So it looks like the animal soul is the one with all the energy, right? Because when I see a cake of brownies, I get very excited. I have a lot of energy. It's obvious, right? I can see it. It's right there. My physical eyes can see it. And even though the animal soul has such a head start, in fact, it's the divine soul that is the more powerful, right? And the only reason the animal soul has been given such obvious advantages is because at their source, the divine soul would be able to eliminate the animal soul just in one moment. So the animal soul really needs advantages for it to be a fair fight, for us to have an interesting life, where we're challenged, where we learn. Yeah? And that's because the divine soul to the animal soul is like light to darkness. Like light to darkness. And if I'm in a dark room that's just completely pitch black, and I light one small candle, the candle doesn't have to struggle with the darkness and fight with the darkness and overcome the darkness and kick the darkness out. It doesn't have to at all. Thank you. Sure. If you could help me, we're trying to get the air off because it's loud and cold. Yes, Eric?
He already knows. Herman Hall, too loud? Right?
Just
Too cold. Too loud and too cold.
Yeah, so if we just turn all
air out.
Thanks.
I'm always cold. I'm all in.
So that we can listen.
So is the animal soul by 12 or 13 die off?
No, not at all. No. The animal soul is struggling and fighting, and there usually for a whole life. It doesn't die off. But we have techniques to address it, which we're learning. Yeah? But the relationship between the two really is that of light to darkness. So when I'm in that room and I light the candle, the light doesn't have to struggle with the darkness or evict the darkness. All the darkness was an absence of light. That's his whole identity, was an absence of light. So once I light a candle, now the darkness is just effortlessly gone. Because its definition was the light's not there. Once the light's there, now you see there wasn't such a thing as darkness. It was just a negative kind of definition. The only definition it had was there wasn't light there. But darkness itself has no reality. It's just the absence of an actual reality. So were the divine soul and the animal soul to both be here at birth, consciously, the animal soul would just be this subtle voice in us that said, you know what, I haven't eaten in a few days, maybe I should eat, right? I'm going to die, right? You know what, it's raining, let me see if I can find a shelter, right? I'd never be looking for, these $1 million mansions to feel wonderful. Not that there's anything wrong with a mansion, but my animal soul would never really have the force it has. It needs, thank you, it needs that head start for there to be anything like a fair fight. Right, let's go on. כי הגוף נקרא עיר קטנה וכמו ששני מלאכים נלחמים על עיר אחת, שכל אחד רוצה לכבשה למלוך עליה.
For the body is called a small city. The two souls in relation to one's body, are just as two kings who wage war over a city, with which each wishes to capture and dominate, even against its will, and to rule with the consent of the populace.
And so here's the metaphor we're using. The body is a city. Right? The body is a city. And like a city, it has areas, it has inhabitants. And unfortunately, there's not one ruler of the city. There's two rulers, two kings. And the two kings are waging a war. Right? And so if you've seen what a war looks like, unfortunately, we've seen reports and television on what a war looks like in a country. The whole country is upside down and people are running and hiding and there's battles. It's terrible. Imagine if that war were centered just in a city, right? The two mayors of a city actually having an actual war, right? So not just a civil war in a country, but in a city. And just packed in, those old cities had walls. Imagine the mayhem. That's why, if just left unchecked, if just left to our own tendencies, many people experience this climate inside of incredible stress, right, of incredible tension. Because we are a city, and there's two kings actually fighting a war to control the city. Dehayinu lanhig yoshveha kirtzono, sheyu sarim lemishmato b'chol asher yigzor alehem.
That is to say, each king wishes to direct its inhabitants according to his will, so that they obey him in all that he decrees.
Upon them. Right? So the inhabitants of the city, so the various parts of the body, and we've looked at what the thought, speech, and action are, the garments of the soul. We looked at the different components of the soul. And we've looked at the organs of the soul and how they like to express, and that each of the two souls wants to express its full complement, right? It wants control of the intellectual and the emotional attributes. It wants control of the three garments of expression. It wants its organs, its 613 organs, to be expressed fully and to connect with the Ein Sof in the way they connect, right? So each of these kings wants every single one of these organs to obey them implicitly 100%, right? And why is it that there can't be power sharing here? Right? We look at this metaphor and you think, well, okay, one solution is for one king to surrender. The other solution is, look, there's two of you, grow up, share, be mature. The animal soul has things it needs to do. The divine soul has its own mission. Let's work it out. Why isn't that an option? And it has to do with the worldview of each of these souls. If we look at what the divine soul is, as we said in chapter 2, it's an actual spark of godliness. It's an actual spark of godliness. And so its highest goal and its truest reality is that it simply is a ray within the Ein Sof, and it wants to rise up like a flame of a candle and leap back to its source and be completely annihilated in its source, be completely consumed, as it were, to have no identity. To be, like we said in our last text, in Sharich V'Emunah, to be like a ray of light within the ball of the sun that has no identity. You look at the sun, you're like, there's no ray there, it's just sun. Right? I know theoretically there must be rays of light in the sun like outside the sun, but it's sun, there's no ray in that state. That's what the divine soul wants. And anything that separates it from that identity is completely the opposite of what it needs. It's completely death, right? For the divine soul, being cut off from its source in any way, even subtly, is total death. Because it knows that it's part of an infinite source. And if you're part of something that's truly infinite, you take one tiny step away from infinite, now you're non-infinite. And it doesn't matter how close you think you are to it, non-infinite is all just non-infinite, right? It doesn't matter if you're at 1 or at 1 billion or at 1 trillion. Once you're away from infinity, now it's all the same. You've left, and now you're cut off from your source. You see what I mean? So there's no little steps outside. There's no little, I'll give in here. The divine soul feels like the moment the animal soul gets control of any one garment, of any one faculty, and expresses itself, now I'm infinity minus something, right? Okay, I'm really close to infinity. I was just at infinity, right? Don't worry, divine soul. No, it's not infinity anymore, right? It's finite, and finite doesn't exist compared to infinite. Now I'm gone. Now I'm cut off from my source. So the divine soul really feels like any expression of the animal soul is death for it. It cuts it off from its source, which is life. So it can't surrender. It can't give in. It can't give one pinky. It can't give 1 inch, right? Much like us when we go to the doctor. I want to be healthy, right? And the doctor says, well, that pinky's infected. We'll have to remove it, but the rest of your body's fine. I can't help the pinky. I'm like, what? I came here to make my whole body healthy. I don't want to lose my pinky, right? And the doctor might say, what do you mean? It's just a pinky. How often do you use it, right? Many people go life without a pinky. We're not going to worry about the pinky. Like, no, I want the whole body, right? So we understand that feeling where when it comes to things like health, we're not going to budge. We're not going to give an inch. We want the whole deal. We don't want most of my body to be healthy. And that's how the divine soul feels about the animal soul, right? You can't let it have even one expression for a moment. And then the animal soul, how does that feel? The animal soul looks at the divine soul And the animal soul's whole identity is, I exist, right? I'm a being. I don't want to be nullified. I don't want to be consumed in the infinite. I don't want to leap up and lose my whole identity. That's death, right? You want to go commit suicide. This divine soul is crazy, right? It wants to actually end our existence. So the animal soul is like, it's driving the car, and there's this kid next to me that says, I want to fly off the cliff in the car, please, I want to fly off the cliff, let me drive just once, right? And you say, no, I'm not going to give this kid the keys to the car, not for a second. He's going to drive off a cliff and kill both of us, right? He wants to leap up, or she wants to leap up and be consumed with this infinite source, and we'll all be gone. Like, that's death. So they're looking at each other, and they each think the other one wants to kill themselves. That's how diametrically opposed they are. They each think the other one is insane, and you cannot let that soul drive this car. You cannot give it the keys to the city. You cannot let it control one house in the city, because it's insane. It wants to end us. And here they are locked in battle. And we're going to see how that battle plays out and how we can get involved. But the deeper truth is, there's only one way to resolve the battle. It's not power sharing, right? If the animal soul wins, and that's pretty easy, like if we let the animal soul win and we just do what we want to do and don't have any boundaries and just enjoy life in whatever way seems best for us and don't think about the people around me and, why shouldn't I be happy, and just go down that path, it's possible to trap the animal, the divine soul, so that it's so covered up that you're not conscious of it anymore. You can do that. But the truth is, even though you won't be conscious of that spark, you'll never be happy. The divine soul will always be restless. It will never be happy being conquered. Because that core of our soul is always there, always trapped within us. And even if it's not in our consciousness, it's in our subconsciousness, and it comes up in various ways. And we've seen, no matter how much money I can get, no matter how much fame I get, no matter how much whatever I get, I always get back to the same place where there's this restlessness, and I'm not satisfied, I'm not happy. That's how it works when the animal soul wins. And so you'll never be settled, you'll never be happy, you'll never be content letting the animal soul win. However, it's a complete Russia. I mean, if the animal soul is completely dominant and the divine soul has no conscious expression, that's a complete Russia. Right? But even complete Russia, they don't have that, Now, if we let the divine soul win, if we help the divine soul win and conquer the animal soul, something very different happens. As we'll see at the end of the chapter, the animal soul is not what we think it is. It certainly is not what other religions have portrayed as this evil intention that's there to destroy us, that's there to fight against godliness. It's actually also on our side, but its role is to give us a good fight, right? And it really does it, and it's been doing it for a long time, and it's very good at it, and you don't want to underestimate it. But if you can let the divine soul conquer the animal soul, in the end, once the animal soul has been stopped and reoriented and is now moving in another direction, the animal soul can actually be happy. The animal soul can be happy being conquered, much like a domesticated animal, right? If I see a wild wolf or a wild dog in the wild and I try to come near, right, it's going to be very unhappy. But give me 5 years of feeding the dog and taming the dog and bringing the dog in and training the dog. Now we're going to be best friends. The dog will be very happy being tamed, right? That's what our animal soul is like. It's really a process of stopping its negative tendencies, of bringing it into the mission of the divine soul, and eventually the animal soul, its whole orientation can be changed, and it can be happy. So the only way to end the conflict is for the divine soul to win, because the animal soul, as I said, as we'll see at the end of this chapter, its nature at its core is not what we think it is, right? It has the same mission as the divine soul. It's just a mirror that's fighting it for purpose. Any questions about that? That's kind of a big look at the battle we're looking at.
Well, another question, but I just think that it's very interesting. On the one hand, God created all these things for us to struggle so that we appreciate what we have. I mean, just like it's our job to heal the world. I mean, originally He gave us Gan Eden and it was all beautiful, but we messed up, and now we have to constantly struggle to be able to get to a point where because we're working, then we appreciate it.
Yeah. And you use the word struggle many times, you use the word working many times. And so, for anyone who has dipped into Eastern pathways, whose alarm bells are going off at all this struggle, conflict, work, right? Hold on, isn't conflict the enemy? Am I supposed to free myself of conflict? Isn't conflict always bad? We may as well just touch on it a little bit, because while in the East, having no conflict is seen as an ideal, and that when you struggle with something, you're strengthening it, and really now you're a part of it, and you're trapped by it, and really the goal is to transcend it and to just not engage in the struggle and let the dualities fade away. In Judaism, tranquility is actually not seen as a primary pathway, right? Tranquility is not seen as a primary Jewish pathway. Who is tranquility in the Torah? Noach, right? What his name means, tranquility. Was Noach Jewish? No. Noach was righteous in his generation before there were Jews. Noach did his thing, father of all of humanity, but not Jewish. That wasn't a Jewish pathway, right? And from my perspective, because I've dipped into the Eastern style meditation and trying to avoid struggle, and the truth is sometimes you just start struggling with struggle. You know what I mean? Like, I shouldn't be struggling. Why am I struggling with this? Stop struggling. Struggling is the enemy. Don't struggle. Well,
Doesn't struggle and conflict give us the opportunity for growth?
Exactly. So in Judaism, struggle is seen as actually a very meaningful part of spiritual growth, and we're actually given quote-unquote negative side so that we do struggle with it, so that we do grow. And you have your ideal of your potential, what you can be, and then you have what you actually are, and you can improve and improve and improve, and that's great, but your potential is always much, much higher, because we're dealing with, this is a conversation with an infinite being, so to speak. So in Judaism, the spiritual pathway is called avoida, it's called work. And so to actually resonate with the Jewish soul system as a seeker, it may be good to lose that idea that struggle is the enemy, that struggle is always a problem, that conflict is a problem. And it may be good to embrace that in Judaism, actually, struggle is what we do, right? There's no reason why I should be a negative person. There's no reason why someone in my family should have negative character traits. And I should struggle with that in healthy ways, in proper ways. But I shouldn't just say, oh, well, if my children are hitting each other, it's all illusions, so I'm just going to sit here and meditate. That's not our pathway. I know that's an oversimplification of the Eastern pathway too, but that's what's happening inside me. There's two beings struggling, and I want to get in there, and I want to actually master the struggle and grow from it. I don't want to just make the struggle something that's foreign to me.
And also the fact that, like you said, in the final analysis, we don't want to destroy the animal soul, we want to tame it.
Correct, yeah.
And make it work for everybody's benefit.
Yeah, and that's another difference between East and West, whereas in the East, the ego should be actually obliterated. Well, not West, but Judaism. In Judaism, the ego needs to be elevated, not destroyed. I can be the same me, make the same dumb jokes, the same talents and the same weaknesses, same person, just normal identity. But I'm taking that identity and I'm elevating it the way I elevate an etrog when I use it on Sukkot, right? We hold an etrog, it's a physical fruit, and yet that's Ein Sof right there, right? Somehow we're integrating spiritual and physical, and we're bringing in, making a home for the Ein Sof, which transcends them both. And so I'm doing that with my ego too. I don't have to end the ego. I don't have to take my etrog and blend it up and evaporate it to make it spiritual. I make a blessing, right? It's still an etrog. It's what it is. Same thing with my ego. It remains intact in our system. However, we're elevating it by integrating it with my spiritual components. So ego, we don't have to spend 20 years obliterating your ego to be a master of this technique. Sorry if that's a lot of preamble. Good. שהאלוקית חפצה רצונה שתהא היא לבדה מושלת עליו ומנהיגתו.
So too.
Oh, did I? Sorry. כך שתי הנפשות האלוקית והחיונית הבהמית שמהקליפה נלחמות זו עם זו על הגוף וכל איבריו. So too,
originates from Kripa and is therefore the very antithesis of the divine soul, wage war against each other over the body and all its organs. The body being analogous to the city and the organs to the inhabitants. Here too, each soul wishes to direct the city's inhabitants according to its will as follows.
All right, so every day I'm walking around, I'm thinking, speaking, and acting, and I think it's just me thinking, speaking, and acting. That's my reality that I've established. That's my lens. Here comes the Tanya lens. We put it in, right? There's the slide. There's two beings, and every time I think, speak, or act, it's one or the other. And they're fighting. They're struggling at every moment. Every word that I say, each one of them is trying to grab that steering wheel. Every time I think something, each one of them is trying to grab that steering wheel of my physical brain. Every motion that I do, every action, every time I walk, they're grabbing that steering wheel of my physical body, trying to control it. And as I said, a big part of this technique is starting to become aware of those two categories in real time. Because according to the Alter Rebbe, what's happening is there's two of me, there's two souls. Every time I think, speak, or act, it's one or the other of them that is asserting itself. And the other one is fighting, struggling to gain control back. And that's all happening not necessarily in my consciousness, but I can become aware of that, what seems like a subtle dichotomy to me now, and it become more and more clear and real until you can track this in real time in your life. You could say, you know, today was really one of kind of these days, right? I lost my temper, or, you know, I didn't share this, I snapped at so-and-so, whatever. And there's ways of dealing with that. We're human. Or I could say, you know, I think today I scored pretty high. Today I was thoughtful. I helped other people when I thought or spoke or acted. It was primarily my other-centered drive. And, you know, give myself an 8 out of 10, and let's keep trying that. So part of the technique is creating this new lens where we become aware of who it is that is thinking, speaking, or acting. שאלוקית חפצה רצונה שתהי לבדה המושלת עליו המנהיגתו.
The divine soul's will and desire that she alone rule over the person and direct him.
וכל האיברים יהיו שרים למשמעתם ותלים אצלה לגמרי.
So that all the organs be subject to her discipline, following and obeying her dictates, and furthermore that they surrender themselves completely to her, that they not only obey her, but also surrender their will to her.
Right? And why her? Because as we said, everything in Kabbalah is a masculine-feminine dynamic, where the feminine is the receiving vessel and the masculine is the light that's flowing into it. So everything that exists, other than God, which you can't define, but every being has a female vessel that is its connection to reality, and has a male flow, which is its spiritual source. That's what masculine and feminine mean, right? The fact that men and women in some ways sometimes model that is just another way that the Ein Sof is trying to illustrate for us what's happening in the spiritual worlds.
So the divine soul is feminine.
Yeah?
The animal soul is masculine.
No, the divine soul is feminine because God is masculine
Okay.
compared to the divine soul. God's not a man,
Right.
but when you're talking about the soul is a spark from the Ein Sof, and so the Ein Sof is the soul is flowing out of the Ein Sof. The soul is the feminine vessel, recipient, and the Ein Sof is the masculine out of which it flows.
Okay.
Right? Between the two souls, I don't know how masculine and feminine works there. It depends on the conversation, I think. I don't know. But so on the one hand, the divine soul wants to rule over the person and direct them, and also wants the organs to surrender themselves to her. Right? And the word is vitelim. That's from bitul, from nullification. Right? So it wants that every organ of the soul of the person be actually nullified to the divine soul, right? So that the divine soul can just flow through them, right? If I want to pick up this phone, I don't have to go and engage each of my muscles in my hand and figure out how my hand does it, right? My will says pick up the phone, my hand does it. It's nullified to me, right? It's nullified to my will in that point. When you're writing, as we said, I don't have to explain what I'm thinking to my hand. My hand doesn't have to understand the concepts I'm writing and then translate it, right? I'm just writing, and my hand is doing this, and anything that I want, no matter what lofty concept, my hand is writing for me because it's nullified to my will. So the divine soul wants that relationship with chokhmah and with bina and with dad and with chesed and with all of my thought, speech, and action, and with every one of my my organs, which we described as the Jewish pathways of connection, the mitzvot, right? The way that I eat, the way that I come to temple and pray, the way what I do on Rosh Chodesh, whatever it may be, the divine soul wants all those organs surrendered to her. And we go one step further, and we come to a very interesting term, umerkava eleha.
And she desires further still that all the organs become a chariot for her.
Go on, the divine soul.
The divine soul desires that the organs not only surrender their will to it, implying that they do indeed have a will of their own, though it is surrendered to the soul, but rather it desires also that they have no will other than its own, similar to a chariot, which has no independent will, but is merely an instrument of its driver.
So, interesting question. Do my organs have a will of their own? Right? Does my mind have a particular way it likes to think that's kind of already programmed into the brain, and it tends to kind of go down that pathway? I think so. Right? Does my heart have certain inclinations, a way of looking at things, and it tends to react in the same way, right? Something scary to me, it's just like, right? It kind of has its own thing, right? And also the body, the gut, right? It has its own way of moving, its way of being, its way of expressing. The organs kind of have a will of their own. And here the term comes up. The divine soul doesn't just want the organs to be nullified and surrendered. It wants them to be a merkava, a chariot. A merkava. And so if you looked on a lot of sort of New Age websites, merkava is a popular term. And you've probably seen these kind of 3D Star of Davids, and they sell the necklaces, and you can put them on your desk, and you can make a geodesic dome out of them. And great, I think I love those. There's a lot, you can project those into your imagination, and it's a lot of no negative there, I don't think. But what Merkava means in our mystical tradition is not simply a particular shape, right? And I won't say too much about that. But what Merkava means is it means a chariot in the sense of the relationship of will to the driver, right? If I'm riding a horse and the horse is well trained, then I go, and the horse decides, okay, I guess I'm going to run, right? But the horse has a will. It's just the will of that horse has been trained that when I go, now it's going to run forward. When I do this, it's going to go to the right. You know, when I say, whoa, it's going to stop. So its will is agreeing with my will. But it has a will. It's a horse, right? And if push comes to shove, it could do something else. A chariot, right? Just a cart with wheels, does it have a will? No. It's not a living being like me. It doesn't have a will. It's just a chariot with wheels. So if I'm driving a chariot and I tell the chariot to go this way, does the chariot have to agree with me? The chariot itself just goes. It doesn't have a will, right? Whatever I direct it just goes. Its will is just the will of the driver. It doesn't have its own will, which it's surrendering to you, and it's saying, yeah, I'm going to be a good steed. I'm going to go where you want. It's actually just a neutral tool that is completely responding to your will with no will of its own. So that's what Merkava means in Jewish mysticism. And the primary Merkavot are the four fathers and four mothers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Rachel, Leah, Rivka. In particular, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are seen as chariots for the first three emotional attributes. Right? So why, we said before, why did Abraham live this crazy life where he was, he circumcised himself and then run out and take care of some strangers in the middle of the hot sun, and he'd hear God tell him, sacrifice your son. He'd get up early in the morning, yes, let's do it, hooray, right? Why was Abraham such a intense and dysfunctional person, right? I mean, his wife died after he pulled that, right? That's not healthy living. They never spoke again, and she died when she heard the news. This is our model. He's not a model for how to live. He's a model for what chesed is, right? And we can't live with just chesed, not us either, right? If I was just yes, 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 that's dysfunctional, right? Sometimes, no, you can't have a chainsaw, Mr. 9-year-old, right? No, you're not ready to drive the car, right? No, I think that's enough Halloween candy for tonight, right? That's balance, that's love, that's not just pure chesed, right? But Abraham was actually a merkava for chesed of Atzilus, for godly chesed. So until Abraham, chesed was above the world and affecting the world. But when Abraham was born, Abraham became a pure chariot for chesed. And that's why whatever God says to Abraham, yes, let's do it, chesed, absolutely. Let me sacrifice all my children, yes, right? That was it's so dysfunctional, and yet he was a portal to allow chesed to flow into the world in a different way. And now each one of us has inherited something from that, where we have a flow of chesed that we can use in a balanced way. But we needed that first merkava for chesed for the world to be able to almost change its fabric and allow chesed to flow in a different way in our soul pathway. And the same for gevura, right? Yitzchak was gevura, same thing. 36-year-old, or whatever his age was, man, and your elderly father comes and says, here, carry this wood up, I'm going to tie you on top of it, and then I'm going to sacrifice you. You don't say, yes, Dad, sure, right? You don't say that. That's dysfunctional. But he was a merkava for gevura. Oh, God told my father I should be sacrificed. Okay, put a hold on my feelings. I'm not going to fight back. Use gevura. This is what God said. Right? This is not how we should behave in the world. This is a merkava for gevura, and that's why it looks so dysfunctional. And Yaakov was the channel, was the merkava for tiferet, for compassion. So merkava, whenever you see it in any context, know what it means is it's the absolute model for when we have allowed a flow to guide us, so much so that I'm not even saying anymore, you know what, I'd like to sleep in another hour, but I'm going to get up and make breakfast for the kids. Right? That's the right thing to do, I know it. So I can get myself to the point where, yeah, I don't want to wake up early and make breakfast for the kids, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to take my will and replace it with the will of what I'm interpreting as proper behavior, right? My divine soul's will. But if I do it for 5 years, now at a certain point, I don't have to fight anymore. It's just the divine soul's will became my will. It's that time I get up and make the sandwiches. I'm not having to push myself or replace my will with the divine soul's will. That's become my will. I'm a chariot for it. It's a very, very, very high level. There's many levels we go through to get to that. But that's the absolute ideal, is to be a merkava, a chariot. Maybe, I don't know.
It speaks about organs, but it sounds like it's talking more about thought processes than actual liver and spleen and all that.
Yeah. Evarim, so if you remember in chapter, was it 3? We talked about the organs of the soul actually being the 613 commandments. The positive commandments and the negative commandments, and so we had actually the positive commandments are the organs, the negative commandments are the vessels, and so it's a metaphor to talk about the way the divine soul, its structure, and how it relates to the Ein Sof. Yeah, I mean, it's also talking about physical organs. It doesn't want me to take my hand and slap my friend in the face. It doesn't want that, right? So it's also talking about the physical organs, but primarily he means the spiritual organs of the soul. V'yu levush, v'yu levush le'eser b'chinotea v'gimel levushea hanizkarim le'el sheyitlabshu chulam be'evrei haguf.
Moreover, the divine soul desires that the organs be also a garment, an instrument of expression. For her 10 faculties and 3 garments of thought, speech, and action mentioned above, all of which should clothe the limbs of the body.
Right, so actually, to answer your question, here he's talking about the limbs of the body. So when he's talking about the organs before, it really was the spiritual aspects of the soul, right? But also, what we learned about that the organs be a garment for the 10 faculties, in other words, Chokhmah, Bina, Dat, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, etc., of the divine soul being clothed in all of the garments of thought, speech, and action, which we learned about as the structure of the soul. So when I'm speaking, I want that to be the result of the divine soul energizing and engaging my attributes, and then actually flowing out and expressing themselves through the garments of thought or speech or action. And also, and all of which should clothe the limbs of the body. So the body should be expressing the thought, speech, and action of the divine soul. Right? That's the divine soul's battle. That's what it wants to do. And the animal soul is trying to trip it up at every moment.
And the entire body should be permeated with them alone. The body's being harnessed in service of the divine soul might not preclude it serving the animal soul too, on occasion. The Alter Rebbe therefore adds the phrase, the entire body should be permeated by the divine soul alone, emphasizing the divine soul's desire to have exclusive use of the body as an instrument of expression, leaving no place for the faculties and garments of the animal soul.
Right, so this conflict is absolute. They both want unconditional surrender, and it wants 100% control, right? That it alone should control the body. No, yeah, go ahead.
The alien would then so much as pass through the organ, God forbid, the animal soul would exert no influence whatsoever on the body. The above forms a general description of the divine soul's desire to pervade the whole body. The Alter Rebbe now turns to specifics, which organs would give expression to each particular faculty or garment of the divine soul.
Right, so he was describing the battle in general and what the divine soul wants to do. Now we're going to look and we're going to get an overview of the whole technique that's going to be presented to us of how we're going to engage the intellect, the attributes, how we're going to engage the emotional attributes, and finally how it expresses. Right? And you'll see as we go on, we want to refine our sense of states of consciousness. And we talked about gazing at the, just at the end of last week, we talked about, what was the term? Gaze intently at the glory of the King and the beauty of his unfathomable, infinite, and boundless greatness. Right? With our intellect, gazing at the Ein Sof somehow. Right? So, in order to do that, we also have to master what are the categories of intellect. And we want to be clear that it's not my rational, cogitating aspect of my intellect that can actually gaze directly at the Ein Sof. It's actually Chokhmah that does that. And yet, Chokhmah I can't understand. I need Bina to understand anything about it. So I want to understand that duality, that spark of inspiration of Chokhmah. That's what I'm actually using to perceive the Ein Sof, not perceive, but the Ein Sof is entering into my consciousness through that spark. But I can't understand that spark. Now I need Bina to open up that spark and look at the details. And that's where I do my meditation. My heat bonenut, as we say, is on the Bina side. And so the more I can refine Chokhmah and Bina, and then of course engage Dat so that I relate to it, the more I'm able to gaze at, and it's not imagination, right? Although we use visualization, and that's a powerful tool, if you visualize the Ein Sof, you should please never think that's the Ein Sof, right? That's basically idol worship. Right? We don't want to start imagining pictures in our mind and saying, no, I've met the Ein Sof, I'm here, right? That's idol worship. The Ein Sof is indescribable, has no form. However, when you use a visualization, that allows you to focus in on the abstract essence behind that visualization. And as such, it does help us, as we're saying, gain a sense of what the eyes of the intellect are and how we can learn to gaze at the glory of the Ein Sof. But it's a long, long process, and it's more and more subtle as you go on. But to actually experience that and to gaze at the glory of the Ein Sof, I want to start to understand more and more how the intellect works and then how the emotions work. Because strangely, we're not gazing at the Ein Sof in order to have a spiritual experience. Right? That's not the point of this. We're not trying to become enlightened beings who are purely spiritual. That's not the whole point at all. The only reason I'm gazing at the glory of the Ein Sof, as he describes, is so then I create emotions that respond to that through Da'at. And then those emotions help my divine soul express through my 3 garments of thought, speech, and action. And then I pick up the etrog and lulav and I give them a good wave, right? Because that, finally, the physical mitzvah that I do, that's the only place where God's essence comes into reality. No matter how high a spiritual experience or a sense of elevation I may have by gazing at something abstract, I'm never going to reach the Ein Sof there. That's just what I can see in my limited way. So the more I nullify myself, the more I can actually gaze using the eyes of intellect, the more I can channel that down to create emotions, the more my physical body and all its organs can express the divine soul, and then, boom, I've plugged in and I've created a home for the Ein Sof. Strangely, the more I get fixated on how spiritually elevated an experience am I having, now I'm actually kind of getting lost up there, and it's actually Nefesh Be'amid again. It's Nefesh Be'amid's spiritual aspects, but Nefesh Be'amid has every spiritual aspect you could want, right? So if the reason I'm doing this book is so that I can have more and more spiritual experiences, I may just be strengthening Nefesh Be'amid. It's very clever. It can show up at a Tanya class. It can show up with a pad to take notes. Nefesh Be'amid can show up as a very good student, or as a nice Jewish leader, and it's happy to wear that hat and to pull you right back in again. So always keep in mind, that's the shape of the technique we're going to be looking at. And we're going to be looking at different states of intellect and how we master them, and different aspects of love, different states of love, and how we channel one or the other, and also different aspects of fear, of awe, right? Like which we said last week, that's not really our favorite topic, but if you just have love, you're dealing with half the picture. Awe is an important wing in allowing ourselves to elevate in this whole pathway. All right, any questions? I'm hanging out. Thanks very much. Thanks, Adam, for taking care of the air. I appreciate it. Nice. Well, this chapter, this is I got to make up for the quick path through 7 and 8. So.